You know, Dylan and I were just talking. We'd talk about that. I mean, time flies. So much has changed in my life over the last decade. Same with Dylan. Dylan started working with us in 2016. And that's when we first started our annual, and I had written about this before, but as far as videos, 2016 Best Food Plot Mix. If you look it up, you can see me planting in the pouring rain. Dylan captured some really cool footage of an approaching storm coming from the west. We were trying to get that seed on the ground, and I've planted a lot in pouring rain and storms, and this was one of the worst. I wasn't up on top of the knoll, but I was pretty high up, and you can see it was pouring so hard that Dylan was filming from inside the truck, which I don't blame him. I'm not making fun of Dylan. I'm saying, but it was so hard that I had the brim of my hat like this and the water was coming through the brim. You know, a lot of times it leaks on the base or off the front, but it was actually coming through the brim and going down my face. I was literally soaked to the bone, and it started out at like, what, Dylan, 90 and humid?
Oh yeah.
It was nasty.
Very quickly.
Yeah, it was refreshing.
One of those, days you'll remember forever, right?
Oh yeah, and it was, this is our 9th season doing this. I want to take a little bit different approach. I want to help you guys out with your food plot blends and what you're planting. I want you to be successful. We talk about different ways to plant. We have our ultimate no-till. We just shot a buckwheat no-till video of why buckwheat is so important. And even then, buckwheat, we have a food plot seed company. And I'm going to relate it to blends, things that you should plant. I'll mention things by name, but go use your favorite food plot company. I'm not saying you have to use ours. These are not specific. Brassica blend, you could find another place. Our buckwheat, we talked about buckwheat. Don't buy it from us unless you can't find it. We simply offer buckwheat as a convenience to our customers. We make the least amount of money on buckwheat. It's our highest cost seed. Very expensive because we buy pure buckwheat. We don't buy it from some farmer's barn somewhere and get a cheap price on it and try to pass it off to you. We actually buy it and we make very little money on it. We simply do it as convenience. So if you want to buy bulk buckwheat, go to your favorite seed mill. That's not a proprietary blend. Feed and seed mill somewhere, wherever you're at, try to find it. It'll be a lot cheaper. You might be the same cost as we charge. Might be a little bit less, but you don't have to pay for shipping. If you're buying a pallet, we can do that. We can have a pallet shipped to you. You'll save. But even then, you're still paying a couple dollars a bag in shipping, or $10 a bag in shipping when it comes down to it, even if we ship you a pallet. So pure wildlife blends too. Again, relate what I'm going to talk about in this 2024 Best Food Plot Mix video to your favorite seed company. Again, I'll mention it here. We call ours pure. And what's interesting in the food plot seed industry is there's this thing called inert matter on your labels. Even one of our new dealers in Michigan, Harvey's, and Harvey's is in Carson City. They've been around for 85 years. It's a family-owned business. That's who we like doing business with. We don't like doing business with big box stores. If you see our seed in a big box store, it's because the company's been sold and they've cheapened the blends so they can actually turn a profit by getting into the big box stores. Harvey's, they're seeing that in the turf industry. They're even coating turf industry grass seed blends so that it increases the inert matter percentage on the bag, meaning if it says 50% inert matter on whatever you're buying of seed, that means there's not 50% of that. Half of the seed is gone. It means if you're buying 10 pounds, you're only getting 5 pounds of seed. That's very common in the food plot seed industry. They have to pay to get uncoated seed. We have to pay extra to get uncoated seed. So we have blends and we have seeds in there that are uncoated because if you buy 8 pounds of clover, we want you to get 8 pounds of clover. If there's inert matter, don't let anyone fool you and say, oh, if it's coated, it helps it germinate. That's rubbish. What it's doing is it's taking space in the bag. We know that from seed wholesalers and company. We sell enough seed to know this. We've been shown this where they coat seed with lime. So it takes up 30% of the bag, which means they only have to buy 7 pounds of clover for a 10-pound mix. The lime coating is worth pennies and it's worth nothing to your food plot, but that means there's 3 pounds less seed they have to pay for. That's how they get into the big box stores. That's all I'm going to say. That's why we have pure wildlife blends. That's the name of our company, because rest assured, we have a mission of being the most pure seed blends on the market. Not to mention, there's 30 years of knowledge and experience of building seed blends, even writing about in Quality Whitetails in the 2000s for the QDMA, experimenting to the full extent, food plot books, food plot web classes, over 200 food plot articles, over 400 food plot videos on YouTube, lots of experience, and that all goes into the blends. That being said, let's break it down. I'm sorry, some people say, hey, just skip the 4-minute mark or 5-minute mark and go from there and listen. But all this is really important to establish what goes into these blends. And again, go use your favorite seed company. I just want to teach you good blends based on, and this is based on a lot of the questions. We go to a client and we work face to face, and I've designed over 1,600 food plot parcels for food plots along with their management of their property in 26 states. And this is my 20th season doing so. So a lot of experience, because then I get to ask what's worked, what hasn't worked. This is what I recommend. I get feedback. It's about 1.5 to 2 hours out of a 9-10 hour day just on food plots. So buckwheat or not, this is a big thing because we have the ultimate no-till process that I developed 20 years ago, seeded my lawn with it 20 years ago, let alone what we do with food plots now. Buckwheat is an incredible product. It's used for planting into. Some people say, well, I tried the ultimate no-till. I don't have buckwheat right now because the deer ate it down to the ground. It got droughted out. It got weeded out. We had to kill the weeds. I always encourage you, if you have a bunch of buckwheat and weeds coming up, kill the weeds. I showed Dylan an area today where on one of our plots, I took out probably 25% of that plot because we had weeds, strips of weeds, because we had a sprayer malfunction. So I wanted to go back there and take care of the weeds. I don't care if I had to destroy some buckwheat in the process. You got to get rid of those weeds. So now you're at this point where you've tried this ultimate no-till process. And I can say the blends that we have are fall blends, the high volume annual blends, number 2. They're designed not only for high volume, but that you could throw with minimal tillage. Keep in mind, everything you see in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, we haven't plowed, tilled, or disked. Out here for 5 seasons in Minnesota, a lot of the plots we show now, because we live over here, so it's easier to show these, we have never plowed, disked, tilled, anything. Heck, we haven't even run a drag over it. It's all no-till drilled or hand-seeded, and most of it's hand-seeded. We only no-till drill our corn. So, and we have switchgrass, I think 3 acres out of the 17 acres we've drilled. So the rest has all been hand-seeded. And that's easy to do. And our blends are made so that even if your buckwheat failed, get rid of the weeds and you can throw our blends on the ground. They're easy. Easy seeds that germinate well. I'm going to relate each one of these to various seeds. Rye, winter rye, germinates really well just by throwing it on the ground. Buckwheat germinates very well. Peas, forage peas or winter peas, take a long time to germinate. You need a lot of rain. But we actually had peas come up this year because of fall drought. The seed is so hardy, stayed on the ground all the way through the winter, and then germinated this year. So a pea seed is very hardy. The opposite of soybean seed is not very hardy at all. It doesn't take much to germinate, so it'll germinate fast, especially if you have inoculant on it. It'll germinate fast, it'll send out a little leader, and then you get no rain, and it dies within a week. That's the opposite. Hey guys, back to the video in a second, but we have some new seed dealers so you don't have to pay for shipping. Harvey's, Carson City, Michigan. They should have a full supply by the end of the week. Nelson Ag, Viroqua, Wisconsin, Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. And all the way over in New York, Stanley, New York, Marlin Horse and Sons. And then also the Dutchman's Hunting Supplies in Shipshewana, Indiana. Go check those out. Again, save on shipping. Appreciate it. Now back to the video. That's the opposite. Brassica seeds, very hardy and germinate very well. Rape, radish, turnip, those all germinate very, very well by just throwing them on the soil. Clover germinates very well. Chicory, bird's foot trefoil, alfalfa, they all germinate very well by just putting on the soil. Annual clovers germinate very well. So we have a combination of those vetch in our fall blend. One of the fall blends. It all germinates very well by throwing on the soil. So even if your buckwheat crop was a failure, take care of the weeds. The buckwheat, what you get from that is you get moisture retainment because it creates a total smother crop. It gives a greenhouse effect to the ground, holds moisture. It keeps you from eroding your soil because there's a stem about every 3-4 inches. It also is a total smother crop because it shades out the ground and limits a high percentage of weeds from even being able to grow. And then it has fine organic matter. When you pull a buckwheat seed out, it has a mature clump about that big with tentacles hanging down. That fine organic matter is what builds soil. not organic matter like corn, sorghum, winter rye that's allowed to grow to 5 feet. All that takes years and years to break down with nutrients, valuable nutrients that those plants need to grow. So that's where buckwheat is awesome. If you tried it, it failed, it's okay. You don't get the soil building, you don't get the smother crop. You can take care of that by spraying. And then all our blends, the reason we call it Big Boost, it's got a high percentage of tillage radish in there that actually boosts the soil. Our fall blend, whether it's the buckwheat, oats, the tillage radish, all put nutrients back in the soil. Vetch is a great soil builder too. So all our blends build the soil, whether you're able to use the buckwheat or not. High volume annual. There's so many of you out there that are planting a clover blend going into the fall. You're planting it in July, August. And unless you're in the south and you have a lot of rain, you're not going to get any kind of volume for your food plot this year. And you're competing with weeds. You're planting at a time when the soil can be dried out and you have high sun. So perennial should be planted in the spring, or better yet, we have our Dual Threat 365 is now our Big Boost 365, and we added a Fall Power 365. The 365s are referring to the perennial base. Started planting like that 25 years ago, so that you plant with a cool season annual and you're left with that perennial base going into next spring. It's an awesome, and even if you till it under after 365 days, you still have that beautiful perennial base the following year. So it literally is a plot that you can utilize for, or the deer can utilize for 365 days. Annual is awesome because it gives a great amount of volume in a short amount of time. Brassica blends. If Brassicas work in your area, then that Brassica can give an incredible amount of volume in just a 2-month growing season. More volume than clover spaced out over 5 months. Think about that. 2 months and you get more volume. But when it comes to high volume annuals, that time of year, Brassica might be great, but you don't want to have just Brassica on the food plot. We don't do that. We put a blend over here that might be more green related, say like oats, peas, buckwheat, tillage radish, maybe a little vetch, an annual clover. That's on one side, and then we have our Brassica blend on the other. We have both of those now with the 365 component. If you want that clover base, you have to pay more. There's more seed you have to plant, but it gives you a great base the following year. But I want those two blends planted side by side. I don't want separate Brassica plots and separate green plots. I want them in the same, because the green portion, those oats, maybe late planted rye, buckwheat, peas. We're planting buckwheat at that time of year because deer love it in September, October. It establishes a pattern of use. They don't hit the Brassica side that early. When you put them side by side, they hit the early season portion over here. They establish a pattern of use to the plot, and then they switch over to the Brassica side over here. So I like those two stripped out. And if it's a small enough plot, I'm saying 1/8 of an acre, even sometimes less than 1/4 of an acre, and you can't fit both of those plantings in either side because they're too small of an area, then maybe I want clover. And so then I'm putting something like our Fall Power 365, and then I'm layering that with rye a month later in mid-September. And I'm planting almost all of this in August. You know, in our area up north, we're planting late July, early August. In your area, if you're down in Kentucky or Tennessee, maybe even Louisiana, you might want to spread that into more early September, mid-September. So there's about a 4 to 6 week difference from north to south. We're starting ours here the end of July. That'll be, our seed will be on the ground, and we're really looking for some moisture. If we have about a 5, 6, 7 day window we can plant in between other activities, going to clients, whatever it might be, then I'm looking for that time where I can get it on the ground, make sure there's rain in the forecast that I'm pretty sure about, meaning several days where you have 50% or above forecasted over the next week, then I'm going to get that in. Last year was a tough one because we had drought. But I want to get those side by side so it establishes a pattern of use and they can just flip over to the other side. We also use corn. Corn is, again, that's an annual, but it's giving a huge amount of volume for that area. But I want to address my green base first. I always talk about that food plot triangle. You have green down here. That's the food plot triangle. Then corn. And then summer food last. That's on top. if you have enough room. If you have your green, you have enough, then maybe add some corn. But if you're adding corn, I would double my food plot size, almost double it if you're going to add corn compared to how much green you need. It's meaning if you had 4 acres, make it of green, and that lasted into January, February, maybe even March, then if I'm going to add corn to that food plot program, I'm going to almost double that, at least 7 acres at that point.
And how many of that 7 acres would you do in corn then?
About 50%, 3.5. So I'd probably do 3.5 of green then. I'd push my green down a little bit, but then I'd replace that with 3.5 acres of corn. So that way you're adding, and that's what we do out here. We've actually pushed our corn down a little bit because I don't want to brush hog an acre in or 2 acres in the spring. I want to get that number just right. The green is ultimately the most important if I had to choose out here. Good soil or not. So many of you out there are planting a really nice blend, really good seed. I'll talk about like our perennial plot power. Really good perennial blend. It's got 4 clovers, an alfalfa, a chicory, and then a birchfoot trefoil. Awesome. Really good blend. One of my favorite seeds over the last 30 years put into that blend. But if you're putting that blend on a sandy, dry soil and you haven't addressed the pH, you're just wasting your money. Also, if you're putting that blend in right now in the fall in dry soil, in sand, you're wasting your money. If you put it in with a cool season cover crop, like we talk about, either brassica or greens, and you design those brassicas or greens so that it allows enough sunlight to get down to the clover, something we've really perfected over the last 30 years. And yes, it has taken that long. But if you're doing that, then it might be okay, but you have to have that cool season cover crop on top of it. So good soil or not, you have to figure out, am I addressing my soil? Have I addressed pH first, fertilization second? Does you no good to add fertilizer on your plot when you haven't addressed pH, because then the soil can't take, or the soil can't provide those nutrients to the growing plant. We love plot start. So if I have an area where there's only a pH of 5, I might add a ton of lime and then I'll add a 2.5 gallon jug of plot start. So I'm addressing both sides. The plot start allows the plants to uptake the nutrients without the aid of changing the pH. But when it's that bad, say a 5, then I'm going to add both lime and plot start. When you get up to 6 or above, then I'm adding just plot start. And that's what we do out here. All our plots are around 5.8 to 6.5. And so we've done really well by just adding plot start. And I actually, some people won't believe this, but 50-pound bags times 65 tons, that's what I spread on my UP and Michigan property over about a 10-year period. All bags, 50-pound. And at least 25 tons of that, I lost track now. We're opening the bag halfway, 5 feet wide times 100 feet of powdered lime equals 2 tons per acre. You can do the math. Powdered lime, people say, well, pelletized is better. No, pelletized is just taking that powdered lime, putting it in a pellet form that breaks apart when you have moisture hit it. Think Kool-Aid. When it's powder, you rotate the jug, get the water moving, pour the packet of Kool-Aid in there, it dissolves quickly. If you put that same packet of powdered lime in pellet form, it take a few extra stirs because that water has to break down the pellet first before it mixes in the actual powder that's in the pellet. Now there's ag line, like there's heavy grit ag line. It can take 10 years to react, and it's a waste to even put down on the ground because it never brings it up to that 6.8 that you're looking for. It brings it up to 5.8 and then back down again over a 10-year period. So you want to really look at powdered lime or pellet lime. Pellet lime is just a lot more expensive. Used to be about 2.5 times more expensive by putting it into the ground. So good soil. You know, we have a full use of the blends. Bad soil, I'm really focusing on annual rye, oats, tillage radish, buckwheat. Those are all really forgiving of poor soils. Vetch does really well in those cases too. But when you start getting into more glamour crops like beans, peas, clover, even most brassicas, tillage radish is very poor soil forgiving. So tillage radish is a brassica, but it does really well. But when I'm looking at poor soil, I'm really thinking of that. And you're always thinking about timing, because if it's sandy soil, make sure you get it in before rain. Deer numbers. This is a tough one, because you can have a northern area or big wilderness area food plot. You can even have 5 acres, but because there's no other quality forage in the area, no, there are ag fields, don't have a lot of clear cuts, maybe a lot of pine, fir, tag alder, spruce. You don't have quality forage within the area. And then you're getting a lot of attention from daily deer hitting your food plot 24/7. So then 5 acres up north might last 1/3 as long as 5 acres in an ag area where you have the complement of other food sources, maybe even neighboring food plots on other parcels. Even if you have 3 times more deer, still might last 3 times longer, the same amount. So you really have to consider your deer numbers and region you're in. Very, very important. If I'm looking at small plots and I'm in a northern area, then I layered rye. I came up with that a long time ago where we're putting 100 pounds down, say in a northern setting like Minnesota, UP and Michigan, northern lower Michigan, upstate New York, over into Vermont, New Hampshire, in those areas, maybe even North Dakota, where it gets colder sooner. I might be putting 100 pounds of rye down 3rd week of August, and then 2 to 3 weeks later, I'm putting another 100 pounds down, and then if needed, another 100 pounds after that, meaning if I still have 50, 60% soil exposure, and I know sun will get to those seeds, I'm broadcasting it right down the soil, and that's it. Go buy the seed from a feed mill. Pretty easy. You start using peas in that mix, or oats, or beans, they're going to be stunted. Deer will eat them, pick them out of there, and you won't have an actual crop. So I want you to avoid failure. And that's not even a seed. Again, go to your feed mill to buy annual rye. If you want to buy a pallet from us, we'll ship it to you. We'll ship it. If you can't find it, we'll ship bags to you. We have them. But you're always better off going to a local feed mill and saving some dollars, in that. But if your deer numbers are high in your area, then consider looking at, Brassica can be a great volume crop. In a high deer density ag area, moderate deer density could work really well. But if you get low deer density numbers in that same ag area, then I'm going to go with more sweeter plantings like peas, late planted buckwheat, oats, rye planted in September, tillage radish, more juicy. And tillage radish is also the brassica that they eat the earliest, soonest in the mix. If you're in a big woods area and you want to try brassica, when you go up north and you plant brassica on a 5-acre plot, you're going to have every deer in the area on it, and they're going to eat it fast. So what we have a big boost brassica mix. I would only ever plant kale within a brassica mix. And we only add kale in one mix, and it's our big brassica, because kale can be a noxious weed and not eaten in most ag areas and most average areas where you plant brassica and have it succeed. It grows into about a 4 or 5 foot plant. It has a stalk that you need to get rid of in order to clear shooting lanes in the food plot, even from late season muzzleloader, and deer just don't eat it in most areas. But when you get into big woods areas, big wilderness areas where you don't have a lot of food, it can be that volume that adds. You're not competing with anything else. So even though it's lower attraction level, you get more volume. So we have that in our big woods brassica. In our regular big boost brassica, we don't add kale, because it returns to that noxious weed form. We don't want it in our average ag mix where deer eat brassica readily, even if they don't start eating until October, November. You don't want kale in there. Anytime you see kale, canola in mixes for brassica, that's a very bad thing. It'll make your plot look like you're the best farmer ever. It's 4 feet tall, but if it's all laying there dead and there's stems that block bullets in December and it's rotting in March, not a good thing, even though it looked really pretty in September and October. So we're not going to sell it to you in our regular brassica blend that we want deer to actually hit during the fall, because it's not a great seed unless you're planting it in those conditions. So deer numbers, you really have to consider. Neighbors, what are your neighbors planting and how much food do they have? If you have 2 acres of plots and you have a lot of complementary food sources, meaning you're in ag land, you have neighbors with food plots, then you can get away with planting some really sweet crops like late planted buckwheat. Deer love to destroy. Peas, maybe light planted oats, tillage radish, vetch, clovers, annual clovers, all that sweet goodness stuff, tillage radish. You can plant that because your neighbors have food. If your neighbors don't have food, always remember they're going to hit your food plots a lot harder, even if your neighbors are just pure ag. Because ag is bad when it gets into October, November. Ag supply food is ever shrinking. It's less and less and less. So really consider what your neighbors are doing and how it influences how much you're going to plant or not. Always consider too that if you're doing it right, your deer are focusing on, the deer in your property and around your property are focusing on your food plots during the daylight, and then your neighbors after dark. So it's a very good thing if your neighbors have food plots. Most people overhunt their food plots. They turn them nocturnal very fast, meaning over 90% of all hunters. So if they're only hitting yours during the day, that's out of 5 feedings that deer whitetails feed in a daily pattern. It's a rhythmic feeding pattern. That's how whitetails, they'll feed on yours maybe a little bit in the morning. They're in their bedding areas. You should have good browse on your property. And then they feed afternoon, and then you're on your neighbors for 2 solid feedings after dark. That's a very good thing. So always consider you can get away with sweeter plantings, smaller plantings if your neighbors have good food sources on theirs, because your neighbors are after dark and you're actually doing it right, how we teach on this channel, and making sure the deer feed on your property during the daylight, in and around daylight, as opposed to middle of the night. Planting equipment. Like I said, we don't plant with a tiller, a disc, a plow. We don't work the soil at all. So that means our plantings are very efficient. We spray weeds when we have to. That's why we love the buckwheat smother crop, because that eliminates a weed spraying that we have to do during the summertime to keep weeds at bay. So we like that balance in everything we do. Chemicals are part of that balance. Very important that you always consider that. If you're going to have crap food plots because they have a lot of weeds in it, then why even plant them? You have to control your weeds. So if you can use bad food plot blends that you need a crimper for, and you introduce this seed or that seed, but you don't really have a good attraction, yeah, maybe you can control weeds. But if you're not planting attractive food plots, why are you even doing it? And a lot of that stuff's expensive. Kind of not a real smart way to do it. Look at balance of everything you do. But a balance comes with equipment. Again, we don't need a big tractor. We don't, all our greens, consider this, we have about 6 acres of corn this year, maybe 6.5, out of 21.5 to 22 acres of food plots. So everything else is green. We do it all by hand. We do use a PTO mounted spreader sometimes. It's just a cone shaped spreader, just throws it out for convenience. But we can easily do that with a hand spreader. So you can use that hand spreader. You don't need it. We use a Packer Max. We can pull it with a 4-wheeler. It's ultimate cul-de-packer. Fill it with water. It's a lot of pounds per square inch. Pretty cool. So we really like that Packer Max. We're smashing down. We smash our buckwheat down with it. We spray at the same time. Yeah, we use spray, but we really address that balance. But we don't need a lot of equipment. With a handheld spreader, an ATV, and a cul-de-packer. My ATV that I have, the 4-wheeler, we have a Yamaha Grizzly, an old one. I bought it used. I think I paid $3,400 for it. We've had to give it some upgrades and maintenance over the years, but it runs beautifully, and that's all we need to plant. We use side-by-sides and everything else. We get a lot planted with our Fall Power Greens, Fall Power 365, or Big Boost 365. We can plant lots of food, all our switchgrass, our Green Max traffic blends, our deer fence screening. It's all made to just throw on the ground. Maybe use the Packer Max to run over it. Maybe use the buckwheat to aid in germination. But bottom line is, we don't have to use big equipment. Now, if you have big equipment, I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy that. I mean, have fun with your tens of thousands of dollars in investments. But you can have beautiful food plots like we do without doing that. And you don't ever have to work up the soil, which brings more weed seeds up and more bad soil down below. You always want to work on that top 2-3 inches of layer of soil, and forget about below that, because that's where your plants grow, in that top 2-3 inches, and that's it. Every time you plow and bring up 9-10 inches underneath, you're just diluting that goodness that those plants need on that top layer. So your equipment will determine how fast you can plant and how much you can plant. I actually had a tractor I put over 500 hours on. It was a 48 horse. I had all the bells and whistles, cab, heater, everything. And I found that the latter years that I owned that tractor, I converted completely to no-till, because with a side-by-side and a cul-de-packer and a handheld broadcaster, I could have the same plots and do it in 1/3 the amount of time, planting time, by working no-till. So it was more of a time saving to me, and at the same amount of equipment. I didn't have to have that heavy equipment, a light amount of equipment, the same amount of equipment I use right now. And so, boy, you can get a lot done. But if you're going to plant corn and you want to do it yourself, obviously you have to have a tractor, no-till drill, and get into that. But really, you don't need a lot of equipment, and that's a consideration for what you plant. Holding versus hunting plot. On all our hunting plots, I want to establish and let the deer know that this plot's in that location during the summer. So we use clover on our hunting plots. And then on the holding plots, I want deer passing through those hunting plots to get to the holding plot. So if you have 3 quarter acre plots up north, those are all holding plots, and they're not going to last long because you're not creating movement from one to the other. We want bedding area, small hunting plot on the way to a holding plot. A holding plot holds deer until dark. So you have to determine, and a holding plot should be at least 3 to 4 times larger than that hunting plot. It should have more diversity. So I want deer going through a small clover plot that might be down to the dirt, but deer and bucks have been relating to for months at a time during the summertime. It's just part of their daily movement on their way to that holding plot where they actually feed now because they have that diversity. So our holding plots around here are either half of our Big Boost Brassica and half of the Fall Power, or they're 50% corn, 25% Big Boost Brassica, and 25% Fall Power greens. So we have the greens, the Brassica, and the corn for a holding plot. We have a couple that are in between because I don't think there's enough room for corn. I want at least 3/4 of an acre to an acre of corn, 2/3 of an acre at least, somewhere around there. Or I just don't think it's going to last, especially if it's a long strip against a wood line. You take that same amount of corn, you put it in a circle 100 yards away from the woods, it'll last a lot longer than if you put that same amount of clover, stretched it out for 200 yards along a wood line where every little critter can just go into it from the woods, not expose themselves, and eat corn. So you want it away from that woods. If it's in a block, you get corn to last a little bit longer. But once you determine holding or hunting plot, on all our little hunting plots, we're using our perennial plot power. We establish that with either our Fall Power 365, or we have that great green growth on top. We layer that 30 days later with rye, and you're left with that perennial blend for the following year. So it's worth 365 days. You can till it all under and start over the next year. Or we have our Big Boost Brassica or Big Boost 365, where we can do the same with the 365 blend, meaning that perennial base. And we do that on our hunting plot. So the bench plot this year, that's one that we're planting. It's a new plot. It's currently in buckwheat. And that one will be the Fall Power 365 this year. We'll plant that around the end of July, early August. And then that'll get eaten pretty hard. But that clover is establishing. And then when we get into mid-September, we'll layer that with about 150 pounds of rye for that fresh young growth that acts like a reinforcement from the invading army of deer. And we'll hold that, and then we'll kill the rye out, either mow it or kill it in the spring. And we'll be left with a pure perennial blend. So very important for you to determine holding plot, hunting plot, and then plan accordingly for planting. Great time, ultimate best time to get a perennial plot established is in the fall. Get it established with that cool season annual as a nurse crop and as a forage crop during the season while the perennial base is being established down here. And then the perennial base you can spot seed, frost seed, spot frost seed in the spring if you need to fill holes, or maybe you don't, and just let it go until planting season, the end of July the following year. And then timing. Deer numbers. Let's say you want to increase your deer numbers. Well, then you need to plant some fall crops or some summer crops. I'd plant clover all summer, even if you plan to convert half of that to cool season annual. Beans during the summer. A great attraction for deer. Suck deer in, you keep them on there. But if you have stable deer numbers or too many, try to reduce the amount of summer food you have to an absolute bare minimum or none at all. And for example, out here, we have good deer numbers, but we don't need to have more deer numbers. We already see a lot of bucks. We don't even need to see more buck numbers. Here, I wouldn't mind in Wisconsin sometimes more bucks, but bottom line is we maintain. So we have about 2 acres of hunting plots with clover, and we have 16 acres that are all cool season annuals, no other summer food. So 16 acres, no summer food, 2 acres summer food. That's a good ratio. In Wisconsin, we have 0 summer food because we only have 3 1/4 acres. And we don't have any hunting plots over there because we'd spook the deer and ruin the land. So we don't hunt with a bow on all of our plots. All of them can be gun hunted off from the distance, non-spooking. And when I say hunting and holding plots, I should back up because a holding plot, you can always hunt with a gun from a distance, but you don't want to get on there with a bow and spook those deer off because you ruin your land. So that's what I mean by bow hunting plot or not, backing up to that. So deer numbers, are you increasing deer numbers? Then you need to get some summer food on the ground. Are you decreasing? Then get rid of the summer food. Hunting plots, small hunting plots are the exception, especially when they're only 10-15% of your overall food plot acres. And time of the season. Now, I had someone mention one time, they're like, well, we only plant beans because we love December hunting and muzzleloader hunting. Well, I would make a point. For one, you're only hunting leftovers. So if your food is peaking in December, Well, what about establishing a pattern of use in August and September? What about holding them in October and November? And then they're there in December, you have a great hunt. Maybe you love gun season mid to late November. But if you haven't established a pattern of use, why are those deer going to go live somewhere else in the fall, in September, October, November, and then just magically come over in December? Like I said, you're getting the leftovers. People have already picked off a lot of the bucks and best deer in the area. You're not building a herd because you haven't established a pattern of use and held them. So when people say, I really love hunting the late season, you can't forget about the early season. You have to have those good greens to hold deer early, and then they naturally will switch over in the same plot. You want the same combination everywhere, evenly distributed through your land. So you don't want to have brassicas here, clover here, greens here, corn here. You want to have those all in each plot. Let me repeat that, all in each plot, because then you establish a doe residency against each plot. They don't have to fight with each other and keep switching bedding areas and home ranges. You just let them align by social status. Let them each align to a specific food plot and stay out of each other's way. And for that, then you'll have a buck relate to each one of those movements. Instead of making this giant chaotic mess of different food sources on different plots, making the deer go back and forth when those attract in nutrition, when they increase in nutrition and attraction. So really timing, even if you like the late season. Late season, brassica is great, beans are great, but you have to get the beans there. So if you have nothing else in between time, you got to fill, like I said, that food plot pyramid. You're filling September, October, November, December, and then you move up to corn, and then you move up to greens, beans, clover during the summertime if you need to increase those deer. So when you have beans, now maybe you fence it off and you just open them up in December. That's not a bad tactic, but we don't even do that out here because we don't need to. We already have that attraction. We're already holding deer. And even if our neighbor has beans half a mile away, if all the deer have been on our land September, October, November, December, why are they just going to go over there for beans when they already have enough food here, corn and greens and brassica that they can hit? So I was thinking about maybe you only like the early season. Well, think about holding deer during October, November, December so that you can actually build a herd and have a great hunt the following year. You can't just think about your favorite time of the year to hunt. You have to think about the entire season, and that's the kind of properties we like to build. And when we go through all this right here, these are the questions we ask a client when we go to their property. We do this in a 2-hour conversation so that we can prescribe what is best for their food plot. And I can tell you, I'm going to go to 8 clients starting this week, 8 and 9 days. It's a normal client trip for me. And I could have 8 different food plot programs because of all these different variables that you fill in. That's why I wanted to go over everything. And what we've done in digital land management at whitetailstrategy.com is we take all of this, put it into an algorithm, and spit out what you should plant. Because someone will say, I have a pine thicket with sandy soil in Arkansas, what should I plant? Well, I don't know, because I need to know all this stuff. That's what you need to figure out, all this stuff. And as it relates to all these food sources that I'm talking about, to determine what do you plant. We have a food plot seed company. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you specifically to buy our stuff, buy your favorite blends, but relate it to what I'm talking about. You can buy our stuff. I'd love for you to. I'm not saying that. But bottom line is, there's a lot of choices out there. Just make sure that you're using the right food plot strategy. I saw something, a quote from a food plot seed company said it matters what you put in the ground. Yeah, it matters. But the strategy of food plotting and hunting and holding deer and habitat management matters first. We sell pure seeds because we want you to get the most bang for your buck. We want you to get the most from your money, your hard-earned dollars spent. So that does matter. Determining what's right, but if you put in the Brassica blend versus the fall blend, yeah, you can make a mistake, but that's not as critical as where that food plot's located, how you access your land, if you spook deer off that food plot, the size of your plots, matching your food source to the soil, those are all important. The strategy of food plotting is what's critical, and that's why we have all of these videos, and that's why we have digital land management. That'll be coming out soon. This is a big portion of food plotting, is a big portion of that. Go to whitetailstrategy.com to sign up for that. You'll start getting newsletters. You've already had 4 Zoom calls with up to 50 people asking questions. It was awesome. We had a great time. We'll have more Zoom calls in the future to talk to people. We need beta testers. Bottom line is, there's a lot of good stuff coming from food plots. We talked about all the seeds you can plant. The bottom line is you're better off not having a food plot at all if you're just going to overhunt the land and spook deer off them to your neighbors. I've gone to a lot of parcels like that where, boy, they would have been better off. They would have actually had a better hunt and a better herd if they weren't inviting every deer in the neighborhood to their highly attractive plots that they professionally manicured and planted, only to spook them back off like a pinball game. Make sure you follow the strategy for hunting. That's ultimately the most important step. I've tried to go through everything to help you pick the best seed based on your conditions. That's our best 2024 food plot mix. I can't believe it's the 9th season already that Dylan and I have been doing this together. And going back to that time where he was watching me soaked outside the truck, and that was on that hot day. I think we broke the cheaper Cultipacker we had on that stretch. I think first time using it. But time flies when you're having fun, I guess. And that's why I really wanted to go into detail on this. And I hope this, most of all these little pieces, helps you not only have a great food plot program this year. That's easy. It's easy to plant good stuff and have good green growing and make it look good. But I wanted to make sure that you have a good food plot based on how you can hunt your land, how you can hold deer, how you can grow a deer herd, how you're improving your soil, and how that gives you and your family and your friends an enjoyable hunt this year and beyond. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching the video. I appreciate you watching the videos. We have over 600 articles on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. It's all free. And I also appreciate those of you that check out our books. I have 5 books starting from 2012. We have web classes on the site, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. Check out Pure Wildlife Blends. I really appreciate you guys that have already purchased our seed. We've had thousands of people. We've shipped to 48 states. We have digital land management through whitetailstrategy.com. That's taking all these ideas and concepts I put in the YouTube videos and digitally transforming your land for you. And then finally, we have our clients and client visits. We'll visit over 300 clients as a group this year. We visit anywhere in the country. Boots on the ground is always the best, but we have a lot of ways to help you, from free to client visits and all in between. Check us out again, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, Pure Wildlife Blends, and whitetailstrategy.com.